Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tandy Balfour. Thank you so much for joining us. We welcome you to yet another riveting, I promise, discussion on Spotlight Conversation. And today we're shining the light on educating the African child. And we want to look at what is shaping currently and what should be shaping the African mind. So as usual, I'm not alone. I've got our very own resident, Bamugosi. Welcome, Mfundisi.
Thank you, thank you.
And then as our guest today, we've got Ubabun Ndlovu, who is currently a principal at Blue Hills College. Welcome, Babun Ndlovu.
Thank you.
Mfundisi, I'm going to start with you. So throughout this season, in the many different topics that we've covered, you've always referenced this issue of education. You've mentioned that there's a lot of unlearning that we need to do and relearning that needs to happen. So I want us to start by looking at what was learning and what was education pre-colonization for the African?
Thank you very much for that important question. Because one of the things we need to clear is the fact that anything pre-1652 was darkness. It wasn't. Our glory years were between 207 AD and 1652. Our science rose to amazing levels. Our culture. We're pristine primarily because we're one community that had a uniform culture. But when whites arrived here, with the theory that black people were a degraded form of humanity, that were the last bonds of creation, they tarnished all that history, sent it to the garbage can, to the extent that many Africans who have not studied education, especially in post-secondary institutions, think that we come from darkness. We don't. We don't come from darkness. We come from light. It is now that we've been thrust into darkness. My last comment is that the years between 1652 and now are marked by a multiplicity of pagan cultures, theories, that have moved into African life. Today, our children are being taught by atheists and evolutionists and sexual perverts in our institutions. And this has affected also religious institutions.
So what was learning then like? Did we have, for example, formalized learning like we do now with the schooling system, or what was it like?
It was formalized, but there were no classrooms. A local monitor of women, it was based on what we call the monitorial system. A young lady in the village who was the senior lady among generally unmarried women would educate girls. The same happened with the male figures. They would be taught military skills. They'd be taught arts and culture. I've written a whole paper on pre-colonial African education that I'm ready to share with you. We taught everything, including star study. We taught everything. There was nothing, and all this was theocentric because African education and moral development were based on a theistic creationist model. Whites came here, they thought we were pagans, and they started teaching us pagan theories. Let me pause right there.
So I still want to latch on to what you're saying there, because if we then had this solid education that was, that helped us to survive as
Yes.
Africans, what made it easy for us to let go of that?
Christianity. Whites zeroed in on our spirituality because they knew that this was the mainstay of our existence. They then brought a damaged Christianity to Africa, full of colonial ideas, pagan practices. The Catholics were the greatest culprits here, and they still are even now. And remember also that many Protestant churches had pulled out of Catholicism. So they remained with what would we call in African language, insila of Catholicism. Which is why one of the things they would not relent on is Sunday keeping, which is a pagan tradition, which only began after the disciples had died. There's no Sunday keeping in Africa prior to white arrivals. There are 103 languages in Africa that call Saturday Sabato. Ethiopia was never colonized by whites. So we have been paganized, not just colonized, we've been paganized by the presence of white people. They may not like what I'm about to say. Unfortunately, some of them are inside the Adventist church.
Ndlovu, let me bring you in here. As an educator in this system that's now been described by Babu Ngozi, in your, and maybe not necessarily even in your institution, but in your thinking, how do we marry that? Because, I mean, we're not going to go back to the 1500s, right? But how do we try and capture the African mind in an understanding of who an African is in 2021, finding ourselves in terms of where we are in the systems and the structures that we're operating within?
Okay, thank you. And first, thank you for having me. And thank you, Pastor Nkosi, for your presentation. First, let me comment about pre-colonial education as well. And in the pre-colonial education system, which did not have the classroom like Pastor Nkosi has said, we had so much respect by the learners of the time.
Yeah.
And we also had so much parental guidance of the learners. And something interesting also, the child of that time belonged to the community. And when you look at the system that we have now, the child belongs to the family. And the community is not so much involved in the other person's child. And as a result, we are almost losing our children in the situation that we have now in the schooling system. And we look at culture, and where we are, culture does not look like something good to the education system that we are following, which is unfortunate. Just like Pastor Nkosi has said, we wish we could have a kind of responsible blending of the cultural practices which are good with the Christian system that we are following. If we could blend that responsibly, we would have the best of the child that we can produce in the 21st century. Right, let's now looking at the child that we work with currently and the system that we follow. Like Pastor has indicated, it is guided by colonialism, let me say, introduced by colonialism. I will not blame Christianity so much, but I know it's the colonial system that brought the education system. And then, unfortunately, when we inherited the system, we unfortunately began to look down upon our own cultural systems, which were good. That's why I say I wish we could blend those. And then we have an African child who is African cultured, and then he comes into this Western education system, which, if not monitored properly, is making us lose our children. I can pause there for now, and then we continue later.
Which brings me then to my question again. What is it about the African that makes us what makes it so easy for us to drop our own and adopt others? Because I think of places like China, for example. They're still very strong on the Chinese culture, as much as they're quite modern, and a lot of technology and things happen there. When you look at Japan, also very strong in terms of their culture, the Japanese culture, but also quite modern in terms of thinking on technology and application. But us as Africans, we seem to almost feel a need to discard everything African for us to adopt whatever is new. So what is it about the African psyche that makes it so easy for me to discard my own and veneer someone else's?
We have a multiple and a complex challenge there. I think Africans need to restudy pre-colonial issues now. And if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to face the current heretical systems that have colonized Africa, which are causing all the underdevelopment, all the conflicts, all the wars, including internecine struggles within this country. The Bible was brought here by people who never read it. That's one thing we need to establish here. They who never wrote it. Never wrote it. Which is why they stole land. You don't steal land in Africa. Land is not a stolen. There is no African epistemology that justifies the theft of land. Let's say you stole it. The Bible then says in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, you send it back to them with no fee after 50 years. You see, the devil was clever in declaring the Old Testament obsolete. I've always argued to people, why then do you go to Exodus to collect the 10 Commandments? It's to me, the epistemic inconsistency. And another thing is that churches like the Adventist Church need to overhaul their epistemology, their whole curriculum. Because let me tell you something. Until we depart from Eurocentric Adventism in this country, we're not going to win the battle against young people who have been in pagan institutions where they're taught evolution and all these other things. Adventists like going to church, but they don't know that the church they're going to is a colonized church.
But Mfundisi, are you then, well, I mean, okay, you actually did. You said it's Christianity, because I'm trying to think the distinction between the examples that I've given is that they're not Christian countries. So are we bringing it back to that the bringing of Christianity is what's, I don't know, dulled us or numbed us and made us malleable to others, putting others first above us.
You see, the point lies in this fact that while African religious thought was not codified in a book, those who brought the book misapplied it. And Africans did not know that there is misapplication taking place. They only discovered when they went to colleges and universities that they were taught the wrong stuff, which ultimately led to the birth from 1872 now of African-initiated churches. The AICs are a rebellion against religious colonization, primarily.
But I still maintain, and I think to bring you here, Baba, as well, I still maintain, were we then really that strongly embedded in our own belief system if we could easily let go of them like that when someone else comes and says, hey, here's something new and shinier?
We were. If West did not bring guns here, it would be better than what we are now. They brought guns here and killed a lot of us. They fought against the natives of this country, which is why I'm arguing, as an Adventist, that white Adventists here need to come to the party and tell us why they've participated in wars against African people here. Why they have written texts that undermine our dignity and our culture. Why the General Conference is feeding us white angels and white Jesus. Why everything in this church is Eurocentric and white. We need to start an epistemic revolution, not reformation. You see, when you reform, you are changing this and that. But what we need to do is to capsize this whole Western epistemology from Advent. Otherwise, we're not going to grow. As we said in another presentation, the fact that we have not hit 500,000 membership in South Africa since the 1880s is a scandal. It shows that God is not going to bless something that is defective.
just hold that thought. I just want to remind everyone at home that we are live. So if you have any questions or any comments, please send them through so that I can get our esteemed guests to actually address them. Mamlov, this sounds very nice and romantic, this notion of where we were as Africans, but I still maintain this is where we are now, right? And there's a lot of good that is in the formalized education structure.
Yes.
But we seem to lose our Africanness in adopting that formalized education structure.
Yes.
Can you talk us through maybe some of the initiatives in your own institution that you bring in, or some of the thinking that you bring in to just again conscientize those young minds that you are still African?
Yes. Thank you. I will do that. But before I do it, let me take it where my pastor left here. What makes us discard our own systems and glorify other people's systems is mostly the language. You know, language is powerful. I'm a language teacher. My good pastor here is a language teacher as well. Language carries culture.
Yeah.
And the education system is coming to us as Africans in a foreign language.
Yeah.
You mentioned China, you look at Japan, their education system comes to them in their own languages. So when learners are taught to be engineers, to be mathematicians, to be medical doctors, it comes to them in their own indigenous language, natural language. Unfortunately for us, the education system is not properly developed to be carried by our own languages. And as a result, it comes in a foreign language, and education is so powerful. I think it's Nelson Mandela who said education is a tool with which you can change the world. And if it comes in English, and then the child at a very young age, the language that they learn is English. The television that they watch it's English. The school that they go to is an English school. Actually, there are quite a number of schools that don't even have our local languages. It's English and Afrikaans. Those are the languages that you find in the school. How does this then affect our Africanness? Like I said, language carries culture. So if you orient somebody through a language, they quickly inherit the culture of the language. And that's how our African culture, which is so good, has been drowned by Western culture. And then with our children now, if we hardly have grade ones or grade R's being able to count in a local language from 1 to 5, they can hardly do that. But the counting system that they know is English. The languages that they know are foreign languages. And you actually looked at as someone who is special if you speak English, even with a very good accent. People look at you and say, this person is educated, which is quite unfortunate. And then we look at religion. Pastor has already said it. The Bible is very clear and very fair. Unfortunately, the people who brought it, like he said, did not teach it fairly. They didn't introduce it fairly, which then resulted in the Bible looking like it's motivating us to discard African culture. Yet the two can actually go together, and if they were to merge, we would actually have the best of the children that we have. Right, what are we doing at our institutions to try and bring back the Africanness in the African child? Right, first is to bring in the African languages in the teaching system.
Yeah.
I respect the African system, the South African system, because a child is to have the first language and the second language, or the home language and the first additional language. Naturally to us, the home language it's our language. isiZulu, isiXhosa, Sepedi and others. That's our home language. And then we have English and Afrikaans as the second language or first additional language. So that's the first method in bringing in the Africanness in the African child, to make sure that they have their African language taught to them at school. Unlike other schools where the home language is English and then the second language is Afrikaans, or the home language is Afrikaans and then the second language is English. In our school, we make sure that the African language is there. It can be a home language, it can be a first additional language, but at least let the children have the orientation of the African language. In as much as we say it, language carries culture, so if they learn our languages, then they also learn our culture. We also have a special day, the cultural day. We make sure that we bring that in. You will be surprised. On the day we call Cultural Day, the so-called westernized learners who speak English so well, on that particular day, they switch onto African gear. And you really realize that if these learners had been given a chance, they would actually love this. So those are the two main systems that we use at our school to make sure that they have the language, the African language, and we also make sure that all cultures, African cultures, are given a chance to showcase. On that special day, we even bring, they come dressed in African attire of the different cultures that we have in South Africa. In addition to that, they also bring in the African dish, and we enjoy the natural food that we enjoyed in the pre-colonial system. Very healthy food, unlike the one that we eat, the food that we eat now. Thank you.
So I'm having questions in my mind, but I want to read you this definition, and this is to both of you. So education is defined as the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals, beliefs, and habits. And then it says some of the methods of education then include teaching, training, storytelling, discussions, and directed research. So when we limit education to just the formalized, institutionalized school system, we absorb ourselves as parents and families of educating our kids. Where are the parents in this?
The problem with that definition, empirical though it looks like, it omits the ideological underpinnings of education. Education is underpinned by an ideology. If there's no Africanity, surely there'll be Europeanity there. Or some other mixture that would destroy the primary recipient of that education.
But where are the parents and fundis, whatever the ideology is, where are we as African parents when my child comes back from that English-speaking school, Endlin? What happens?
Here's the challenge. The professionalization of life, which also went into its academization, displaced the semi-literate parent from practicing the academic culture of his child. Many kids are more literate than their parents. So Western arrival here fractured a lot of things that will take us an age to fix. The parent, in some cases, does not know what the child is being taught at school.
And I'm not disputing that, but it does still sound like we do then step very far away from educating the child, because I don't have to teach you Pythagoras theory, but I still need to teach you Ukutin Bangom Klaus. That I still need to own, right? Why am I not doing that at home?
Here is one of the major challenges. Your black political leadership has sold itself to whiteness. All they're doing is to serving the Stellenbosch group and other similar groups. I'm telling the truth. We are colonized from the union buildings.
But I want to bring in here again. What are we as parents, what are we doing? Or have we also bought into this? Because why are we not Africanizing our children at home so that even if we send them to the system, we feel safe that they will be able to cope because they're not going to forget who they are, because I've already imprinted that at home, and I'm continuously imprinting that at home.
Right, thank you. The greatest mistake that we make as parents is to trust the school. I mean, the school which has teachers, principals, and other learners. That one is the most dangerous of the three schools that I will present here. Actually, a child goes through three schools. The first school is the home, and the first teacher is the mother. Actually, this one is directly from Ellen White in education, to say the child actually learns first at home. And may I say it that if the mother fails at home as the first teacher, don't think that the grade one teacher will perform miracles. And then the unfortunate system that we find ourselves in, which Pastor Nkosi has already referred to, the westernization. The mother, the grandmother that we have at home, the father, the grandfather, unlike the grandfather of yesteryears or the parent of yesteryears, they were practically involved in the education of the child at home. And now we have the mother who wakes up very early, leaves the child before the child can even go to school. And they come back when the child has come from school. The same with the grandmother. So the child is left now to the dangerous television, which is what is happening at home. Right. The next school after the home school is the church school. Because the child goes to church before they go to the school where there is a teacher and a principal. So the child begins with the mother and the father at home. That's the first school. And then they go to church. They're introduced to the church school. And one important point about the first two schools, they are responsible schools. They are people that we know. The mother will never give harmful information to the child. The same with the church school. People who teach our children in the achievement classes, they are people that we know and they are responsible people. Then we then surrender our children to the actual school that we trust so much. Believe me, that is where the greatest damage is done. And it is actually here in the actual school that all the good teachings of the mother, they are destroyed. That's where the good teachings of the church, if we have just pushed our children to a school where even our religion is not respected. So everything that the church teacher has taught, it is actually removed when they get to school. How is it removed? We have friends. They are better teachers. If we are not anchored properly from home teachings and church teachings, when the child meets friends, the child begins to move away from what we as a home may want from the child. And then in addition to that, the church system is completely removed if we are not careful about where our learners, our children go to get this Western education. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder to those watching at home that we are live, so it is getting warm in here. Please send through your comments. I found a research that actually also tabulate some of the things that affect education in Africa. Language was one of those highlighted as well, because and studies have shown that people learn better when they learn in their home language, in the language that they grew up in. And then it speaks about the culture, the education culture, that it's more European and African, and American than it is African. So again, to what you've said, Babundlo. And then it talks to lack of parental involvement, whether it's because parents are busy working, there's no time to come back and do the homework, because the homework that the kids get, it requires another 8 hours on its own. Or, to what Mfundisi has said, is that the parents are not educated enough to understand and be able to help this with this homework as well. But also we've moved away from the extended family system, so there is no adult support structure except for auntie who's paid to come in and clean the house, or the television. So that's one of the things that has been identified. Then they also talk about other things such as facilities, right? Lack of proper facilities. They talk about immigration as well. So the people who should actually be staying and educating us are immigrating, for greener pastures, quote unquote. And then of course corruption. So the misdirection of funds that could actually be beefing up our education system as well. But I think what I'm picking up from what you're saying there as well is that we seem to have given up on ourselves. We seem to have given into the system and given up on ourselves, and we seem to feel like we're stuck in this. We don't know how we can come out of it, or we're not trying to come out of it. Because we are now. How do we move forward? How do we regain who we are so that our children and their children can have some pride in who they are whilst working in the system?
4 things. On page 254, education, you read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. Ellen White says, there can be no substitute for mother tongue instruction. She also goes to say, on this matter hangs will or woe. Longis? Okay. Yeah. So Ellen White entrenches education in the mother tongue because the language the child hears from the mother develops cognitive abilities in him. The child is able to tell, isinkwa les, ukudla logana, umalume lo, yin logana. And when you take that child to an English-speaking preschool, you are disrupting the linguistic cognitive development of the child. Which is why I don't like all these English-speaking crashes. To me, they are epistemic rubbish because they're destroying who we are. Language is central to identity. That's why the poor, an African-speaking university, they don't care. All they teach is Afrikaans. Everything is Afrikaans. Tina would think we are exclusive if we only use African languages in a university. Because sadly, we've got politicians who are Euro-Africans. Next.
But Mfundisi, so then we would have 11 languages to accommodate, universities to accommodate all 11 languages. We should have in an area 11 schools, because nam funa fundis Xhosa, when funa fundis Zulu, Umsuthu funa fundis Sotho. Is it not a complicating factor that there's so many languages?
Why was Bantu education successful? It emphasized the use of the mother tongue. I'm using the word successful advisedly. All I'm trying to say is, it is practical to teach in an African language.
Okay.
What we need to do as scholars to create the necessary vocabulary now. That's the second point. We're not going to change this thing because the church is also a colonized organization. It believes in nothing else but English. It believes in white theology, white sociology. Everything in this church is European. We even picture Jesus as a European, angels as European. And we've never seen them. But they are Europeans. Why? We're protecting whites who have oppressed blacks. We're protecting the money that the GC must get from Europe and elsewhere. Ellen White says, in heaven, she was shown a vision, and there were far more Africans there than Europeans. I'm telling the truth. Here's the next thing. What we need in the Adventist church is what I would call a revolutionary epistemology that says, let's go back where we started. Even if the church splits, we'll be splitting on very grounds. If whites must stop sending us lessons here that have got white angels and white Europeans. Black people must start creating lessons for their own students, for their own children. This is what I hate among us. We're very dependent. We have many authors here. Why can't we start producing our own material? The last point. Industrialization destroyed the African family. It destroyed. It removed the father from the family. It removed father from the mother from the family. It removed the child became an island of some sorts. We discussed in another session that only men were allowed to work in the cities. Women had to stay in the countryside until the 1950s in this country. They were not allowed to come here. And that's why men started developing wrong sexual practices in the hostels and so on. You get the point? So the program is massive, I can tell. We need a Tom Sankarian man to start saying to white people, go back home.
Wow. So I want to read you some comments and then a question that's come through, and I'm glad someone else asked this question because I wanted to ask it as well. Gosnati Mnisi, thank you so much, says, so we can't blame the school if our kids can't even speak a sentence of vernacular. I'm with you then, Gosnati. We as parents are not teaching our kids to speak their mother tongue. And then Khonze Sitole says, my input on this topic is that the European missionaries made sure that they demonize African tradition and culture. That includes our language, how we worship, and how we enforce the law. Their main objective was to dehumanize African, and that it cultivated a fertile ground for racial segregation and apartheid, which today is a disease that brought in a mindset of white superiority. So the SDA missionaries, they too thrived on the evil practices of European missionaries. It is unfortunate that we as Africans have accepted that we are failures and we need whites to do something to empower us. Very powerful, that Khonze. Thank you so much. And then from our very own Unaya, he says, and this is why I'm concurring, he says, it appears education is the sole responsibility of the mother. What is the role of the father in educating the child? Because you've both referred to the mother. What is the role of the father in educating the child? He says, what happened to apprenticeship that was done by men for vocational purposes? I'm also asking, what was the role of the father?
And it's strange. We talk of a mother tongue. Why don't you talk of a father tongue? This thing is chauvinistic. Because we never called our languages mother tongues. It was whites who did so. Because they removed black people from where they domiciled. So they brought them here so that they could become all sorts of things to them. And I'm at a point where I'm saying we need an about 10 now. We need to hold a private consultation among ourselves in the absence of the whites, Adventists or not, and start going back home.
But Mfundisi,
We're hanging somewhere in the epistemic hemisphere of Europe and Africa. The plane is refusing to land because it is carrying wrong cargo.
yes, and fortunately, I'm amongst fathers here. I still want to know, what is the role of the father in educating the African child?
Very primary. The father is the key because all of us carries male surnames. The father is key.
But Wenzani,
Wenzani has been destroyed by colonization. Some of them are naughty, they're in prison. Some of them are messed up by wrong colonial politics. Some of them are messed up by drinking and smoking. Some are messed up by plain naughtiness. Total irresponsible. The male figure in South Africa is a destroyed figure. We need male restoration in this country.
yes, restoration to what? Bebesenzani before they were damaged.
When
What was the role of
when
the
we meet
father?
them, we will tell them what we restore them to. I know they'll be bringing so many questions. Because let me tell you something. Most black men in this country, including Adventist Church, are defeated. They surrender. They've surrendered.
Babundlovu, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thank you. First, may I say, how do we regain ourselves? Just like the pastor has said, it's our languages. Let our schools bring back our languages, African languages. Let our homes bring back the African language.
Yeah.
In our homes, we are English speaking. And it's not just the child, it's the father, it's the mother, it's the aunt, then the child knows the language of the home as English or Afrikaans. And then there is no space for our language at home. Let's try it. That's where we start. And then the next thing, the unfortunate thing is that the colonial system localized a religion. The Bible was brought to our African level. It was translated to our African languages. The hymnals were properly translated successfully to our African languages. So the same song that they sing in America, we're able to sing it in isiXhosa here correctly and without any mistake. But unfortunately, they did not translate mathematics to our African languages. The fact that we were able to count in our African languages up to 1,000 means that mathematics can be taught in our African languages. It is possible, but unfortunately, it's because the people who brought it had a certain agenda, and then where it suited them, they came to our level. And where they wanted to take advantage of us, it remained in their own languages and their own system. And I know the pastor is calling us to recover. Believe me, it's actually getting worse and worse as the centuries go by. To be able to go back, I think it will be very difficult. I'm not sure whether it is possible, Pastor, for us to regain ourselves. The systems that are used now, unfortunately, the devil is also involved. Because if you destroy the family system, you know that that's where the devil thrives. When the father moves to town and then the hostels, you've already destroyed the family system, which is what God established. And the family was a unit. And the family was in an agricultural setup, where the father, now you remember we're going to the question now as to where is the father. The father has always been there in the home. He's the provider. He's the one who looks after the cattle. He's the one who monitors the agricultural system in the house. He's the one who does all the cultivation and monitors the family in making sure that there is food for the family. Why is the mother seeming to be central in the education of the child? God created us in such a way that at procreation, the mother carries the child 9 months, and the mother has this natural bond with the children. And the mother is so good as a teacher. Generally, the mother is soft, is easy to teach. When you go to schools, you'll realize that where it is most sensitive, it is lady teachers. At the primary school, early stages, mothers are the ones who teach our children when they are still young, because of this natural talent that our ladies have. But it does not mean that the man is not there. The man is there. He also teaches, he's the facilitator. Remember, when you come now to the Christian home, the man is actually the priest. So every system, even if we were to say the home is the school, I would say the father is the headmaster, and then the mother is the teacher. So what the mother is teaching, it actually comes from the head, because he's the one who facilitates everything. Thank you.
The father is the administrator, and the mother is the teacher. That's what I'm hearing. So I was reading this article by Matthew Opoku Prempe. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. He's the Minister of Education, well, at the time of writing in Ghana. And he says 5 ways to innovate education in Africa. And he starts by saying you need to change the definition of classroom and define classroom in a way that our African children can relate to, rather than the 4 walls. And then he says we need to find what's already working and then use what's working to impose the educational principles on it, rather than the other way around. He says shake up the financial models of the education system, right? And then he says find a balanced way to introduce technology within an African context, and then get local support, the community support, in terms of what you've spoken about. Because we can't run away from the fact that we are in this system now, right? We're not gonna switch it off. In fact, we would not then be able, I don't think, to survive globally, because we find ourselves in a global context. I could be wrong about that, but how do we work the system to our advantage? Which is why I think the Chinese and the Japanese and many of those have actually found a way to work within the system and own it without losing themselves, which is where we are. And I mean, another article I read spoke about 3 steps to, again, making education impactful for us. It says, first we need to remember who we are as Africans. We don't teach our children about the education system pre-colonization. They don't know that there was education pre-colonization. They think learning and reading and all of that came here, but we don't talk about Egypt. We don't talk about Timbuktu. We don't talk about the biggest library in Alexandria. We don't talk about, I mean, even right here in Zimbabwe, the ruins, that's architecture, that's engineering, we don't talk about that.
Without cement.
Well, imagine, even the pyramids in Fundis, we don't tell our kids that African thinking was already that advanced. I think right? So he says we need to remember who we are, and then we need to reorient our minds, because when our kids can be proud of being African, because right now they don't feel proud to be African because we don't have anything that we can make them feel proud about, and then find a way to then express this renewed proud mind. So when you spoke, Babandlov, about the events that you have, the cultural events that you bring into use, I mean, and we do that at church as well. We do it at corporates. September, we have Cultural Day. It's an event, though. It's an event. It comes, and then we look forward to it next year. But it's not really entrenching the thinking and the pride. It's not normalizing it. It's normal to see an Indian wearing a sari on a Wednesday. When I wear umbhaco, they say, what's the occasion? So how do we entrench that pride in who I am as an African, and in knowing who I am and the history, this powerful history that I carry, that the things that we think are modern didn't come with the white men on the ship?
Do you know that the Japanese education system is based on Ellen White and Adventist texts? I'll bring a book where a minister of education there affirms this, that we copied our system from Adventists. We have not examined the damage caused by colonization to the African Adventist mentality, which is double, because the whites in the church were part of the colonization of the church. Not only were part of the system, they were also part of the military system to fight liberation movements. Adventist white pastors carried guns against SWAPO, ANC, and so on. They were also functioned as intelligence for the South African government, which is why they are not comfortable when we move into their churches. You see, that union is a fake. What we need to do is to pull out of that union. It is a fake. Here is my scientific reasoning. The Black Union was a Southern Union mission. The White Union was a Southern Union conference, which is why in the Black Union, there was an underground, unknown executive committee of whites. We discovered this in 1972. I can show you minutes to that to validate that. So when the merger took place around 1994, whites were seeking for safety from condemnation by the ANC that the Adventist Church is a discriminatory institution. So our pastors did not understand this. A union conference is not a union mission. The union mission was an upgraded field. The union conference could own institutions. A union mission could not own a university. Whites could own Helderberg, which is why Bethel is dead now, about to be sold, and Kangele. The problem with Black Adventists now, okay, let me start by saying, the problem in this church is no longer with whites. I don't care about which way they go. The problem is Adventists who have been so colonized, especially the pastoral factor, that they will die for white people. They will not want a change of the system because they earn out of it. What is going to happen? A lot of young people are going to leave this church not long from now. I'm telling the truth.
Can I just expand then and say the problem is not even just within the church. The problem is the Black African parent who has been so westernized that they're afraid to reclaim who they are, and they're passing on that fear to their children.
Which is why many of them listen to this program and never comment. They are shivering at what we're telling you.
But here's an indictment on us that's come through from one of the comments. Here we are sitting here in Western clothes, speaking a Western language. Why are we not decolonized, Tina, as a start?
Western, who said these are Western clothes? Only the shape is Western. The material is African. The material is African. Only the shape is Western.
Because
we have all the material for making clothes in this continent. We can shape it the way we like. So talking about clothes is not the issue. The problem is the mindset. I don't need to wear like to dress. There are many colonized African traditionally dressed people in this country.
But would it, and I think, I mean, I said it in jest, but it's actually, would it not be a strong signifier if we even just our thinking, if our dressing, if deliberately instead of a school
No.
uniform, they wear ibeshu, okay, I mean, you can modernize it, but would that not already be a strong signifier, just the way you dress?
Well, let me tell you something. I've thought about this thing, but I've been confronted by the reality of historical and sociological changes. One, a lot of us no longer see nakedness as something natural, half nakedness. We see it as an attraction for sex. If you came here dressed like a Zulu maiden, men would say, wow. And they'd only look at one part of your body, right? So over a period of years, what should have happened was that we should have taken what whites brought here and designed it to suit our cultural thinking. Why is it wrong to wear shweshwe in church? Why? Why is it wrong to wear shweshwe at school? Because the shweshwe is natural. You get the point? Ibeshu is natural. What's wrong in wearing? You see, here is something. The ibeshu is actually a split skirt, if you look at it very carefully. Because we live in a hot continent, the clothing had to comply with the heat around us. But over the years, climate has changed and so on. But of course, this would be a topic for another day. But all I'm trying to say is, let's go back to the Bible. If we go back to the Bible, we're going to do those things that God had meant us to do. I know there are people who are so colonized, they will want to leave the church because they love whites more than they love God.
Bamdlov, let me bring you in here. Your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I agreed when I spoke earlier that turning back the hands of the clock, it's not easy. It's not easy. Where we are with this technology and this global world that we find ourselves in, it can only get worse. I think the best we can do is let's try at our homes, but it will not be easy. Why is it not easy? Pastor is saying, let's go back to the Bible. Yes, when you look at the Bible, the Bible has family. When you go to the book of Genesis, when God gives us the first family, it is the father, the mother, and the children together. And then we are also given how we are supposed to get our food. Very clear, it's agricultural. It's an agricultural system that we're supposed to follow. And in such a system, it is very easy for the mother to play the role, the father to play the role, for the education system to play its role in a responsible manner. Pastor has already said it, industrialization destroyed that setup and then removed us from the natural, agricultural, rural setup to the Western arranged cities. And it was even worse, Pastor, because, like you said, it was men only, hostel system. And then so the mother is not there, the children are not there. So the family system is already destroyed. And then we have working parents and the agricultural system is completely out. And then the food we eat, let's also not look down upon what we take into our bodies. Far from what God gave us in the book of Genesis for food. And that's what our children also eat. And then you realize that it will be very difficult to reverse, to move people now from rice and chicken. Actually, rice is even better. From McDonald's and KFC to the natural food, the healthy food of the book of Genesis. It is not easy. Then the other point, it's curriculum. You know, curriculum is powerful. What is it that the governments of the day give as what is supposed to be followed in schools? The curriculum we are following is first removing God from the education system. In the past, religious education was naturally given as a subject. As a country, we removed that subject in 2008, I think. biblical studies. It was part of the curriculum. It was actually a study of the Bible where children write an examination. The book of Paul, the books of Paul and the Old Testament, studied by anyone, Christian or non-Christian. It was a subject. And then we removed that one and brought in religion studies. What is religion studies? It's a study of the world's religions. And all religions are seen as equal. So that replaced the Bible in school. And what is a result? The schooling system, like I said earlier, actually brings about the greatest damage to society. What do we have at school? That's where we have drugs. Some learners sell drugs to others. We have bullying. We have all sorts of, we have alcoholism. We have even the issue of relationships and improper associations. Even the teachers are not responsible. We here and there find the teacher is in court having done this and that with a child. It's because we have moved away from what God established as the home for the education of the child. Thank you.
Can I just ask you one more question, and then we're gonna need to round up because miraculously time has gone. Within the schools that you've been involved in, what's the level of involvement of parents in the school? So, for example, meetings that they need to come in. Do they actually participate? Do they come and engage in other things that require parents to be there? What's your experience there, Babundlo?
That's an interesting question. As a school head, I'll tell you that parents are not involved in the education of their children. They don't even look at what kids learn. And after, say, at the end of the term, learners have written examinations and the reports have been published. Learners have not done well. You invite parents for consultations. Those parents that you need the most, they are the ones that you don't get. It's either they are too busy or they are far from being available to come and talk to the teacher about the learner's performance. It so happens that at some point you send a letter home and even send the child with the letter. And the child will tell you that, no, my parents won't come. The learners even know, they know that the education of the child is not priority. Parents pay school fees, pay a lot of money, and then they push learners to the teacher. The teacher is the one who will know what to do. Parents have to be involved even in career guidance for the children. Subject combination, because it is the combination of the subjects that mathematics, physical sciences, then this can equal to an engineer. As parents, we need to be involved in that. But unfortunately, our children, they are just left on their own. And they even make mistakes. They have career lines, and then the subjects and the performance does not balance with the career line. You try to invite the parent to say, parent, come, so that together we can guide the child. Unfortunately, the parent is not available. But although there is a remnant, there are a few who are still very much involved in the guidance of the child. And in most cases, it is the parents of those who are high performers. The parents that we really need to come and meet us, they don't come. Even the parents of those children who are problematic in terms of behavior, and I mentioned issues of unfortunate behavior that we deal with in schools. When you invite those parents, you don't get them. Yeah. At the end of the day, you may end up thinking that maybe what happens at home is what we eventually see being projected at school.
It would appear that as parents and as families, we really have relegated the educating of our children to institutions who don't necessarily really care about this child. This is just a number in the system. That's really sad. I just want to read these last comments while I allow you gentlemen to think of your last closing remarks, because we are at the end already. So Umatokaza asked a question. This was answered, I think. He said, what are you doing, Mr. Ndlovu, on a daily basis or weekly basis to ensure that the true African culture is conserved, taught from an African perspective? You did mention the language being the primary that you do, and then the events that you have. Khunzi Sitole says, African dress code, animal skin dress is not a continental dress code of Africa. Remember, did the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Sudanese, and other countries of Africa wear animal skin during the time of Abraham, Moses, the apostles, etc.? No. So people must not assume that animal skin is a continental dress code. I think we just got it hiding there. To your point, then, Mfundisi, that African dress is very diverse and I guess includes material as well. But Langelihle Dube says that it's time for action to be taken. Mfundisi, your closing remarks on this topic, and again, as usual, there's still so much you could have said, but way forward, what do we do? How do we step into the right direction, towards the right direction?
I have two proposals. One is general, the other is Adventist specific. The first one is that we need to remove liquor and tobacco from African townships. It's an ideal, but I know it would meet strange opposition both from Africans and industrialists. Because these are the major destructive elements in African culture. No young men, especially in the Zulu culture, smoked dacha until they were old enough to have given birth and stopped giving birth. Insangu ngesintu in SawaZulu was used by old men who are no longer giving birth. Today, people smoke it as children. Drinking was reserved for times of celebrations and weddings and so on. My last comment, we need a Black Adventist convention without asking for permission from anybody. We don't want it to be guided by church policy structures and so on, where we're going to map our way into the future. It is not the president's child who is lost, it's your child. It is not the pastor's child who is misled, but your child. The TOC has shut down 16 schools since 1955. One of them they surrendered to Methodists, 117 km south of Kimberley. So there's no hope. I have lost confidence in the structures of the church. Whether this is public or not, I'm telling the truth. All I believe now is that lay parents and interested persons should sit down and map out the academic future of their children. Pastors were not trained as educators. They will not plan education. Thank you.
Thank you. Baba Ndlovu, your closing remarks?
Thank you. First, may I thank you for the opportunity. It's quite an interesting discussion that we have had. My closing remarks, I will say to us as Africans, let's bring the African language to our homes. Good. That's first thing. And then I will say to us as SDAs, let's take our children to SDA schools. Parents, let's know our children's teachers. Let's be involved in the education of our children. And then as SDAs, as churches, let's prioritize children in our churches. Let's prioritize the children's ministries programs, the adventure clubs, the Pathfinder Club, as long as those systems are not empowered in our churches, it will be worse where we are going, because the schools where they go, if they are not properly armed from home and from the church, we will lose them. And then I'll say also, I don't know how we can moderate on the television and the internet. It's unfortunate also, like I said, curriculum, the internet also, that's where education is. That's where research is. But there's also, that's where damage is. But maybe we can say as parents, let's be involved in what our children consume from the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I just want to finish off on this, three things that I found interesting. Firstly, the United Nations says 42% of African school children will drop out before the end of primary education. Secondly, of the top 10 most educated countries in the world, there's no African country that features. Top 10. Lastly, Steve Biko said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So with those thoughts, I want to say, let us not relegate the education of our children, even ourselves, to systems and structures that don't really care about who you are. Let's reclaim ourselves and re-educate ourselves in terms of who you are. But from my side, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. It's really been worthy. And then to our audience at home, we have come to the end of this season. So this is the very last episode for this season. Season 2 is coming. We're still working on it. But thank you for being there with us week in, week out. And I want to thank the team behind the scenes as well. Trust me, there's a big team behind the scenes that's making this possible. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. So from my side, it's really been awesome. And may you all be blessed until next time. Thank you.
Lovely day it will be. For what a beautiful world awaits. Oh, what a wonderful home awaits. We will meet again on a cloud, never to part again. That is sure. What a lovely day it will be. For what a beautiful world awaits. Oh, what a wonderful home awaits. Awaits.